in We're located here in Greenville. You can go to the next slide. We're a long-term residential program for survivors of trafficking, prostitution, and addiction. The duration of our program is 18 to 24 months total, and we use a restoration care model that we borrowed from Thistle Farms in Nashville, Tennessee. We're part of a network of sister communities engaged in residential anti-trafficking work using similar models with slight variations that account for what the specific regional demands are for the shelters. We're a relatively young program, opened the doors in 2018. We had a safe home and 5 beds. In 2020, Jasmine Kitchen opened. That's our social enterprise where women are able to work and earn a wage, plus learn vocational skills in a trauma-informed work environment. 2020 was a really hard year to open a restaurant, but everyone involved in the project was bound and determined for it to succeed. So it did. It is still open. If you're ever in Greenville, please come and have lunch. In 2022, we tripled capacity, adding a second single-family home with a total of 8 beds. And so today we have a 13-bed residential program with 2 transitional studio apartments. And our hope is that the transitional apartments exist for women who need a little more support after they're transitioning out of our residential program. You can go to the next slide. Just very broadly, what is human trafficking? The legal definition of human trafficking is commercial sex that is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. Force is like, I made you do it. Coercion is like, I threatened you into doing it. And fraud is like, I tricked you into doing it. Most women's experience with human trafficking will have a little bit from all of these elements, as you just heard from our lived experience expert earlier on this call. Can move to the next slide. Some trafficking statistics that drive home the reality of the problem we have on a state level. One really great source for reliable statistics on trafficking is the Polaris Project, and that's POLARIS. They run the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and so they capture a lot of really useful data. And they also have a human trafficking one-on-one training that's free and takes only about an hour to complete. You can move to the next slide. At Jasmine Road, we don't just serve survivors of trafficking according to the legal definition. We serve women who have experienced commercial sexual exploitation. My text is a little blurry on this because I chose to screenshot our website. We put a lot of time and brought in a lot of diverse expertise for defining, crafting a definition for this. It is basically an umbrella term that covers trafficking, prostitution, which is the exchange of a commercial sex act for money, and the production or distribution of pornography, but it also covers exchanges of sex acts for anything of value. So what that might look like is that I am needing a place to stay, and so maybe I'm exchanging a sex act for, a warm bed and a shower overnight. And at Jasmine Road, we choose to see no meaningful difference between survivors of trafficking and women who self-identify as prostitutes, because our experience is that once women begin to look back on their lives in the commercial sex industry, that there's a whole lot of overlap. And as they're crafting the narrative of the experiences that they've had, they may see trafficking where before they saw prostitution. And one of the things I love about the story that was shared is that romantic partner element that's very common. So a woman can come to Jasmine Road and on day 1, she's talking about someone and calling him her boyfriend. And on day 200, she wakes up one morning after hours and hours of therapy and our anti-trafficking curriculums. And she says, oh my God, that was my trafficker. You can go to the next slide. One thing that the women at Jasmine Road have in common is that they are survivors of adverse childhood experiences. In the very early days, we used to give the ACEs questionnaire, but the scores were so high and so consistently high, we decided to just dispose of it, that we had enough data. And we've also been working on an ongoing basis to be vigilant about the risk of re-traumatization for the women in our program. And so even though we threw that out from early data, we know that it starts really early and young. Most of the women come from intergenerational poverty, substance use in the family, interactions with the criminal justice system, time spent in foster care, all the things. And by the time women come to Jasmine Road, they've spent years in a cycle of treating PTSD symptoms with substances, finding themselves around the people, places, and things that come with active addiction, being vulnerable to re-traumatization, which causes more symptoms of trauma, which necessitates medicating and making those symptoms go away, and on, many times for years. You can go to the next slide. Some common misunderstandings about human trafficking are who is at risk. A lot of the times I'll go out in the community and I'll kind of hear what the public imagination thinks of trafficking. And so it's like, a woman will raise her hand and say, aside from holding my key out when I'm in a dark parking lot, like what can I do to avoid being trafficked? And statistically speaking, anyone that is at a community event and listening to me speak has a very low likelihood of being trafficked, because trafficking victims tend to have certain vulnerabilities. And so, for example, people who are living in poverty, people who are suffering from mental illnesses, especially young women in the foster care system, and people of color and people of the LGBTQ plus community are also at higher risk. It's not a thing where children are being middle-class children are being kidnapped from the Walmart in Easley and sold into trafficking, although that does happen. It's just not very common. At Jasmine Road, we're a housing first program. We provide 2 years of rent-free housing covering all basic needs. The goal and idea behind that is to bring women's nervous systems out of survival mode so that they can do the hard work of healing and recovery. We do a lot of traditional substance use treatment, making use of our outpatient provider here in town, the Phoenix Center, attending a whole lot of mutual aid groups like NA, AA, we love Favor. We also do some out of the box trauma recovery, healing, such as yoga. We do expressive arts therapy, therapeutic journaling, and all of the women are connected with medical care providers through our partnership at Bon Secours St. Francis Hospital. And in addition, they can access one-on-one counseling with a therapist who's community-based in private practice. We're also doing work on the social work side of things. So helping connect the women with GED tutoring services, higher ed, paraprofessional certifications, getting their government IDs, taking care of restitution. You can go to the next slide. We can go to the next slide. The 18 to 24 months that a woman spends at Jasmine Road is divided into 3 phases, and these phases have varying degrees of accountability and support so that women can get the degree of structure that she needs at different parts in her healing journey. Our hope is that this is a solution to the acute care model where people are going from very, very high control, high structure environments right back into the lives that they had before they entered those environments. Our hope is that it's a continuum of structure and support inside of the safety of Jasmine Road. Go to the next slide. We don't do this work in a vacuum. Although we are not a perfect program, one of our great strengths is leveraging community partnerships. Out of our inability to do everything, we've sort of accidentally created interorganizational safety nets for the women when they graduate. So it's not uncommon for one Jasmine Road lady to have a GED tutor at Lifelong Learning. She's got a community-based therapist. She's in a small group in a faith community of her choosing. She's got a sponsor in a 12-step program. And so by connecting them with our organizational partnerships, they then have partners who they can access and be part of their lives when they graduate. And we can go to the next slide. Because in many cases, the women's trafficking history was born of poverty. Our economic mobility programming is critical to the long-term success of the women. And it's very common for women in their admission interview to cite self-sufficiency as one of their goals. It's the dream of being able to take care of my own needs and take care of myself. We offer employment in our lunch cafe, and then we also make candles and jewelry for retail sale. We can go to the next slide. There are a lot of ways that you can support Jasmine Road. I apologize, our luncheon date is wrong on this slide. It is actually October 17th, so please check it out. And if you go to the next slide, it just has our most common, some helpful resources related to anti-trafficking, trauma recovery, and addiction work. And then the next slide has our website on there. Thank you all so much for listening. Like Sarah, I tried to get through the information pretty quickly to leave room for your questions and feedback.
Well,